but a roundabout, once it's in, doesn't have the same costs for operations and maintenance. When you put an intersection in, you have to continually upgrade those systems, make sure that the electronics are working properly, so there's additional concerns down the way. So when you look at all these things in total, the study was really designed to come up with 3 alternatives that people can consider, which are approaches that utilize a combination of these things to determine which one is the best fit to reduce what we call the misery index, which is the amount of time you spend on that road getting from point A to point B.
Well, we have a limited amount of funding in our line of work. It's gotten better since the passage of Measure X in Monterey County and also the recent passage of Senate Bill 1, which is a big transportation funding measure for California. But still, we need to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck and that we're getting all the improvements that we can for every dollar we spend. So a benefit-cost ratio essentially looks at how to improve things for safety, how to reduce the number of miles people are driving, how to reduce emissions, how to enhance health and quality of life for everyone who has to travel the highway. And those are the benefits, and you compare those to the cost of making improvements. Like how much does it cost to build a roundabout, or how much does it cost to move this much dirt or relocate the power lines, and how much does it cost to buy new land to build a bigger intersection. And that's the cost, and you put the benefit over the cost, and you get a benefit-cost ratio. And that's how we know that we're being good stewards of the tax dollars and making sure we can get all the improvements we can with the money we have available.
All right, so based upon all of the study, you know, the outreach that you've done, the analysis that's been done, there are 3 alternatives that have come forth that you are considering, we are considering for making improvements along that highway. So let's talk about them. Let's bring up the first one, concept number 1. What is concept number 1?
Sure. Well, I'll back it up just a second and remind folks that Highway 68 is very constrained in that we don't have a lot of room to work with. We can't build a big new 4-lane freeway all the way through it, and a lot of people don't want that because it's a very scenic highway.
And that was verified through your public outreach.
Absolutely.
That was verified, Another thing that was verified through the public outreach and the technical work is that the intersections are the real problem point along Highway 68. So starting with Blanco Road, every intersection all the way to Jocelyn Canyon causes problems for the overall highway. And that was verified through the public outreach and the technical work. So we knew we had to improve the intersections first and foremost, and we had to work essentially within the amount of land Caltrans already owned. So this first concept is the skinny version. It's the smallest footprint, and it looked at replacing every signal with a roundabout. And that goes back to the intersection control evaluation and the fact that roundabouts were the most beneficial. And this would have 11 new roundabouts, and it would have some access control. So what that means is if you live off Highway 68 and your driveway is right on the highway, you're turning left in or out, that can be an issue if you're turning left against traffic. So access control essentially is taking away that left turn across the roadway. So it's an inconvenience to some people who live across the highway, but it's ultimately safer for them, and it's a benefit for the highway in general. And this is a graphic that shows the roundabout layout, the design, very conceptual design for each intersection along the highway.
And this is all information that's on the website too, Kendall. So
these exhibits are all there, as well as all the various presentations, and then a variety of memos that talk about how these things were developed.
And so this is the website that you see on the screen there. So now what about concept number 2?
Sure. Well, concept number 2 is very similar to concept 1 in that it's mostly roundabouts instead of signals. But it responds to a public desire that came up in public outreach to widen at least some segments of Highway 68. So it wasn't possible to widen the whole 14 miles of the road, but we could widen about 6.5 miles in different segments, essentially from the airport east towards York Road near Ryan Ranch. And then we could add 1 lane, not 2 lanes, but 1 lane from Morelos Grade to Corral de Tierra. And then conceptually we could widen it from 4 lanes at Corral all the way back to where it's currently 4 lanes. This is a very big footprint. We're taking a lot of new land that's currently grass or trees and turning it into highway lanes. It also has more restrictive access control because a lot of those segments are going to have a big concrete median right down the middle, so you couldn't turn left across it even if you wanted to. And it's also the most expensive. It's just under $110 million.
Right, and it's almost, the last one was what, 48.2 million.
Yeah.
So obviously the things that you talked about, the having to have land and all that stuff, all of the construction costs factor in on that.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the difference really between 1 and 2 is, as Grant was saying, the roundabouts have their own costs, but this because of the miles of highway actually making more road, putting
Yes.
more road down, that's where you see the impact. And the other part of this, when we talk about environmental impact, because it goes out wider, it increases capacity to a certain extent, right? But it absolutely is going to take some of the aesthetic charm of the highway away. So that is a trade-off.
Right.
And what's interesting is that, you know, when we talk about these types of things, this is 9 roundabouts as opposed to 11. And when after we discuss the third one, it's really interesting to look and see how each of these stack up in terms of their ability to actually reduce delay. And they have some work better than others, and some are relatively close. So it's kind of an interesting piece.
Be sure we come back to that after
We will,
to the
yeah,
third
third one.
concept. So
Yeah.
let's put the third concept up and talk about that. What's the third concept?
Absolutely. Well, understanding that some people are not fully in favor of roundabouts, we wanted to look at if there was an option to keep the signals and to make the signals work better. And the way you do that is through a neat, new, innovative computer system where the signals talk to each other. It's called adaptive signals and integrated corridor management systems. So these are these acronyms.
I was going to
That's
say,
okay, don't you
sounds
go
like
there.
an acronym.
Yeah, it's back in the
too.
day we used to say the signals are signalized, right? So
Right.
they're on a timer.
Right.
These are reactive, so they can adapt to different traffic flows at different times of day. So they're smarter than I go 40 miles an hour and every 2 minutes I can go through something, right?
Right.
These are more adaptive.
Now the issue is Highway 68 is so long that you can't have all of the signals synced up. We could sync up from Jocelyn Canyon to York Road, and then from Laurelis Grade to San Venancio, but that whole middle
That's just
section,
a technical issue?
it's
That's
the
why it's-
technology isn't there to
Okay.
bridge that width of a roadway, that length of a roadway. So it's limited in that, and this concept would also have a small section of widening that many locals would recognize from the Freeney Ranch development. It would be from the existing 4-lane section towards just before the Toro Cafe and the parking lot to the Fort Ord National Monument. Then it would go back down to 2 lanes, and it would just be syncing up the signals from there.
I think
Okay.
what's interesting about these 3 corridors and something to keep in mind, Measure X allows for approximately $50 million towards this project.
That's right.
But because of the way that tax revenue works, or self-help counties work, that all those funds are leverageable. So the
That's
idea
right.
is with any one of these 3 concepts, we would anticipate that there would be additional funding in order to fulfill them from a fiscal standpoint. So if we wanted to go with number 2, that additional $60 million approximately would likely come from a grant that would put that in there. The other thing that's interesting on this is that when you look at the 3 concepts, each one has a benefit. Each one has something that's really good about it and something that's not so good. So as an example, with the adaptive signals, all those, you're still going to stop and start quite a bit going in. It's still going to be there. It might be better, but not quite. On the 2 that have mainly roundabouts, right? You're going to continue moving, so that's going to have a benefit. But if you go with the ones that are widening, there's some trade-off in terms of the local flora and fauna.
Right.
What's interesting is that on the website right now, we're asking people to participate in the virtual workshop, which allows them to look at each of these 3 concepts and then talk to us about what things they like and what things they don't like, and then rank them in order of preference.
Right.
So we can look at that. We've already had over 210 people participate online. We would certainly love to have more. More is always good. But it is very important, I think, for folks to take the time to look at the different concepts and really think about what they like. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is I find so fascinating, older Americans, older people, tend to be more, they'd like to embrace roundabouts more than some of their younger counterparts. And we hear a lot
Do you
because
find that interesting?
I do, and it doesn't surprise me because in many cases they've been able to travel to Europe and other places where these are readily seen. And so they're like, oh, I was there and it was great. One of the things, I think we talked about this at our last meeting, if one of these concepts moves forward with roundabouts, one of the keys that will be for TAMC is to make sure that there's really good education helping people learn
Right.
how to maneuver through a roundabout, because they are great, and ironically, statistically speaking, if you have a population that is opposed to them, once they are in, the studies indicate a huge shift where they went from I hate this idea to oh my gosh, I can't believe we've never had roundabouts before. So you kind of see that. That's also available on the website to look at that data.
That's available on the website, but Grant, I'm going to ask you to do something else. We
Sure.
have roundabouts right here in our community.
We absolutely do. We have a lot in neighborhoods. And we also have them becoming more and more common in cities like Marina on Reservation Road, on Del Monte Avenue,
Right.
in CSUMB, on Inter Garrison Road.
So if somebody wanted to learn how to drive a roundabout who hasn't done that, they can do it like right now,
Absolutely.
today, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Make a day of it, take your lunch out to Marina, see the roundabouts, come back, you're going to love it.
Yeah, or go to CSUMB, or if you live in Salinas,
Yeah.
there's a roundabout in Salinas. So
absolutely.
they're very easy to drive through and go through. I think it's the fear of the unknown. But let me get quickly to, there were some alternatives that were not selected. We talked about the three concepts, but what are the things that were not selected, and why weren't they selected?
Sure. Well, there have been two historic bypass plans for Highway 68. One was through Fort Ord when it was decommissioned. Caltrans wanted to just build a new 4-lane freeway through it, and the existing 68 would be a frontage road. As time went on, it wasn't fundable. It was put on a back shelf, and now it's a monument. So it's really not feasible from the Bureau of Land Management standpoint to
Right.
build a new freeway through a national monument. It's also very expensive. It has a lot of environmental impacts. The other bypass plan, which is not on your screen, but it's the Corral de Tierra bypass, which was adopted as a plan line by Monterey County back in the 70s. Similar story to the other bypass. It was never funded, and now there's been development around the area of the bypass, and its actual start point is in the National Monument. So that's again,
not
the
happening.
same issue.
Yeah.
The other option was a reversible lane, similar to the Golden Gate Bridge, where it's morning, we have 2 lanes going that way. It's evening, we have 2 lanes going this way. And getting back to the cost-benefit analysis, it really didn't pencil out as a good alternative. And also, the highway throughout the whole course of the day doesn't have the directional split. Not enough percentage is going this way or that way to
Right.
justify that type of thing. And so it does work great in some locations, like the Golden Gate, but just wasn't a feasible option for Highway 68.
Okay. So what are the next steps, Kendall?
Well, where we're at right now is we are have the online survey open at this point, and that will stay open likely for a little bit longer here in June. One of the things we're going forward to next is the draft concept plan, and that'll be presented at the TAMC board on June 28th. And that's an opportunity for us to say, look, this is the technical data that we received, this is the public input we received, and this is the recommendation. And at that time, the board will make a decision. Once we have that done, we'll also be going out with that concept back to the public and saying, this is what it was, this is what you like. And then the final adoption would be at the August 23rd board meeting, where they would say, yes, that is the plan, and we want to go from there. Now, as we were talking just before the taping, should this move forward, then we're probably looking at basically a 3 to 5 year time frame for the subsequent environmental review and the planning and all this to happen. And one of the questions that came up quite often at our meetings is, well, how are you going to build 11 or 9 roundabouts and keep things moving? And the good news on that is that actually this is something that has been done in other corridors. And what they'll do is a phased approach, where they'll do 1 and have a bypass, and 2, and slowly get them all in place. But it won't be like 68 is completely shut down for 2 years and no one can get on it.
And so on that note, I want to thank you both very much for being here. I appreciate it. And again, we can put the website up. We can refer people to it. They can still do the virtual workshop, and they can see any of the presentations and all of the data and all of the things that we mentioned. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. And we'll see you on the next Keep Monterey County Moving.